Hi, everyone. I wanted to take a few minutes to work with absent students in particular, although this might end up to be the way that everyone learns about the Marius section, the beginning of it, just depending on how much time we have. We're a little short on time this week because we are talking about choosing classes for next year, and so that's taking up some of our class time. So here's our reading calendar. So especially those of you who are home, if you've been homesick, be sure that you're keeping track of the reading calendar and hopefully staying up to date on your reading. So what's happening is that on Tuesday and Wednesday of this week, we will discuss the Cosette section. Excuse me. And then we are going to take a test on Thursday and Friday. But I want to do this part with you, this explanation of the Marius section and characters, because even though we're testing on Cosette and that's our focus this week, you are being asked to go ahead and start reading the Marius section. And with the first time that I read the book, I found that section to be pretty confusing in terms of characters. So I have a document that I have posted in this assignment, this materials page, that is an explanation as you get started in the Marius section. And this is an explanation of these three characters: Georges Pontmercy, Monsieur Gillenormand, and Marius. So these are three men, and they are related to each other. Marius is the child, Gillenormand is the grandfather, and Pontmercy is Marius's father. And we met Pontmercy in an earlier section in Waterloo. Pontmercy was the man who, at the Battle of Waterloo, was basically under this pile of bodies and left for dead. And then this terrible person in our book, Thénardier, who happened to be a soldier at this point in his life, so he also was at the Battle of Waterloo. He is up and walking around and sneaking around, and it's this terrible scene of all these bodies of men who've been killed in this battle between the French and the British. And Thénardier is stealing from the bodies of any soldier, French or British. He's basically going along looking to steal from people. And that section in the book is at the beginning of Cosette, and it's called Waterloo, the Battle of Waterloo. So we met Pontmercy at that point for a very short little window of time. We met this man, and he has a terrible saber cut down his face. A saber is like a sword, and that is his distinguishing injury after that battle. So he's not dead when he is under all these bodies in Waterloo. Thénardier is trying to pull a ring off of his finger, and as he's pulling that, he wakes up Pontmercy. And Pontmercy is, bleary, and of course he's injured and he's not thinking straight. He thinks Thénardier is saving his life and that he is indebted to him forever, because essentially Thénardier pulled him out from this terrible scene thinking he was dead. And he had already stolen his wallet. They call it a purse. He had stolen his purse with his money, and he is stealing his jewelry. And so anyway, Pontmercy very blearily says, "What is your name, Thénardier? I'm Pontmercy." And so we have met this man in that very short time period. So this section on Marius is heavily into politics, the politics of the time. So let me explain these three men to you. So Pontmercy is Marius's father. He could be classified as a rebel or at least a liberal. He looks for change in the previously corrupt government and fights for the new emperor. So remember that France had always been under a monarchy, kings and queens. And we have talked about how it was a very uneven distribution of wealth. And so people like Pontmercy wanted to see a change in that. They did not like the way that France was being run. And so that's why we say he was a rebel. And he eventually fights for the emperor, which is not part of the monarchy. The emperor is part of a republic. The idea behind a republic, we live in a republic. So the idea behind a republic is that the people have a say, they vote, they're involved in the decision-making process of their country. Pontmercy has a very important job. He's not just a regular guy. He is a colonel in the Napoleonic army, Napoleon Bonaparte's army. So here's a little bit of history. During the French Revolution, several factions fought against the monarchy of France, demanding a change in the way the country was being run. This liberal view resulted in the First French Republic. So power went back and forth, back and forth. We're going to have a republic. The people are going to be in charge. No, we want the monarchy back. The kings and queens are in charge. Now the monarchy's back. So many different political parties wanted to take control of the vulnerable French government. Anytime you have a government in change, it is vulnerable. Someone else can step up and take charge. Eventually, Napoleon Bonaparte, very famous person in history, became the emperor of France, and then he led his army to try to conquer more and more land for France. And you can see some countries listed here. So that's what Napoleon was about. And Montmorency is on Napoleon's side. He wants change. He doesn't want a monarchy anymore. So Montmorency was married to Gillenormand's daughter. Gillenormand has very different political views, so he never agreed with his son-in-law. Unfortunately, Gillenormand's daughter died in childbirth when she was having Marius. And so there was no way this grandfather wanted this man, Montmorency, to raise his son because they disagreed so much. And so Montmorency agrees to give up his son to Gillenormand. There's quite a bit of money involved in the Gillenormand family. They're rich. And so basically the grandfather says, I will cut off all money from my grandson unless you let me raise him. There's no way I'm letting you raise him. So Montmorency agrees to that and essentially gives his son to his father-in-law, this old man, to raise. But he's not happy about that decision. And you'll see in the story that he goes to mass, to church every week, and he kind of hides behind this pillar because he's not allowed any contact with his son. He hides behind the pillar and he watches his son in church because he wants to see him grow up and he loves him and he wants to see him at least once a week. And so as a father, he regrets this idea, but he thinks he's doing the best thing for his son because it's such a leg up in life for him to have this money. All right, so here's the grandfather in the center. And we said their political views are very different. Gillenormand has money. And so people who had money under the monarchy's rule weren't necessarily unhappy. Life wasn't bad for them. They were rich, just like the monarchy was rich and all nobles were rich. And so he doesn't necessarily need change or want change. He's satisfied with the traditional ways of France. He likes the idea of a king and queen being in charge and this status or class system that's always been in place. So he is called a monarchist. And so monarchists believed in and supported the royal family. And of course, they were opposed to any kind of revolution. And we have some explanation here of why they would be satisfied with that. Gillenormand lives a very lavish lifestyle, a lot of parties, a lot of socializing. He doesn't really work. He's wealthy. He has a fancy home. Okay, so those are things to keep in mind. And so that's how Marius, this young man and this little boy at this point, is brought up. So understand that as a grandfather, Gillenormand loves Marius, but he's one of those people who has a hard time expressing his emotion. And so every time Marius comes around him, he'll like hold up his cane and threaten to hit him and yell at him and scold him all the time. So he has this love inside, but he doesn't show it on the outside. On the outside to Marius, he's a very gruff, mean, strict grandfather. It's important to know Gillenormand keeps Montmorency, Marius's father, a secret from him. At times, Montmorency writes letters to his son, and Gillenormand hides those. He doesn't give them to Marius. And he speaks really badly about Pontmercy in front of Marius. So Marius grows up believing that his father is a terrible person. He has no redeeming qualities, and he does not care about him at all. There's no contact between father and son allowed. All right, so on the right-hand side here is the child. He starts out as a child in this section, but we're going to see him grow up during this book. So, as we said, Marius's mother died during childbirth. Marius, as he is a young man and has gone through some college and is now in law school, is confused about his political views. He grew up as a monarchist, like his grandfather, right? That's what he was told was the right thing to be. But when Pontmercy dies and Marius goes to see him, the story starts to unravel this secret of who his father is. And so then he realizes, wait a second, my father, Pontmercy, was actually a hero, and he was trying to do good things for the country. And so that makes him confused. Does he go with what his grandfather has always told him, or does he go with these new beliefs of being for the Republic like his father was? So on the bottom here, I just have that Marius finds out after his father's death that Pontmercy loved him very much. So be sure you know how that happens in the book. How does Marius find out about his father? And then once he knows that his father did care about him and loved him, then he wants to find out as much as possible about his father's cause. What is the Republic really about? Maybe I wasn't told the truth the whole time I was growing up. And then he starts to adopt his father's political views. Keep in mind that Marius did not have this happy childhood with his gruff grandfather. And so part of taking on these new ideas could also be rebellion. He's a young man at this point, and he kind of wants to push back against his grandfather and everything his grandfather believes to be true. Marius is angry at his grandfather because of the way he was treated and because his grandfather kept secrets from him about his father. And so that makes him question everything that he's learned as he was a young man growing up. And maybe he's going to have a different view than his grandfather. So if you know these three men and you have them straight in your head, then that will help you to get started on the Marius section. And just one other note that I want to make to you as we start this, I'm going to show you this page. It's page 243. Let me see if I can get it clear. And it's called The Friends of the ABC. And the Friends of the ABC are basically this group of mostly young men who are fighting against the monarchy. They want the Republic. They want people in charge of France. When you get into this part, there will be lots of men's names. You don't need to know each of the men of the ABC. You don't need to know everybody's name and be able to tell them apart. Just know what their general purpose is. I've also put together a list of important characters and places for you that I'm adding to in our notes in Google Classroom. So I'll put in Google Classroom who the important people are to know in this section and who you can kind of disregard but just have an idea about. All right, so hopefully that helps you to get started on Marius. And as always, come into class with your questions if there's anything that isn't making sense. Thank you.